Okay, so this is the third video lecture on sleep, and I left off and I was talking about the theories of why we sleep. And this slide is about some of the more common sleep disorders. Now you'll notice the wheel, there's actually a lot more. Well, we'll talk about some of those in the next slide, but the most common sleep disorder is insomnia. And insomnia is characterized by somebody who has trouble falling asleep, staying asleep. They wake up a lot. They maybe wake up too early in the morning and can't go back to sleep. There's a whole variety of different causes could be stress. There's a phenomenon called sleep hygiene. I used to have an assignment where I asked students to describe to describe their sleep hygiene, and this does not mean clean sheets. That may be part of it, but what sleep hygiene refers to, and this is considered to be one of the ways that you might manage insomnia if this is something that you deal with. I deal with it occasionally, is what they call stimulus control, and that is where you have a routine. So the research says that it is more important to get up the same time of day than it is to go to bed at the same time of day. You should get up the same time every day. You should have a routine before you go to bed. Don't have any extraneous exercise right before you go to bed. Certainly no caffeine after like noon. What are some of the others? Read, don't look at screens. One strategy is you should turn your clock around, like especially if you have insomnia. Your digital clock, because what happens is you wake up and you go, oh my gosh, I only got 2 more hours, and this causes more stress. So there's a whole variety of different strategies for that one. Sleep apnea is this one. Gosh, there's so many commercials about this one. Sleep apnea is a phenomena where people quit breathing and they builds up carbon dioxide and they wake up. Right. So the treatment for that typically is something called a CPAP. And a CPAP forces air down, holds the mouth open by forcing air into the lungs. So many older people seem to have sleep apnea for various reasons. And then narcolepsy is another really common one. My first experience with narcolepsy was many, many years ago. I had a student who kept falling asleep during class, and I would do everything I could to keep him awake, right? I mean, everything. The kid just would not stay awake. And it was really kind of like disturbing. Like, this guy just falls asleep in class all the time. And one day he stayed after class and he told me that he had been diagnosed with narcolepsy. And narcolepsy is a sudden, overwhelming sense of sleepiness where quite literally you could be sitting, there's something called a cataplexy, and you might be just like sitting there and suddenly fall down and fall asleep. Or you can stand up. You can just be standing there and suddenly fall asleep. People that have the diagnosis with narcolepsy, though, often don't have a driver's license, because imagine if there's certain occupations where you cannot do if you have narcolepsy. So like imagine you're driving a semi truck or something like that and you suddenly fall asleep behind the wheel. That could be like deadly to people. So anyway, lots of things can mess up a person's sleep. There's a whole group of disorders that are called parasomnias, and parasomnias are characterized by movement during sleep that is not normal, right? Not normal. So probably one that's really common may be sleepwalking, and sleepwalking is not common, but it's more common amongst children at stages of rapid growth, right? So it's thought to be again, when I was talking about the hypnagogic flinch, how those happen kind of right, all of these disorders seem to happen at the stage in sleep that goes between a sort of a short wave and a long wave. So a person is more likely to sleepwalk because obviously their body is supposed to be paralyzed. And it is more common for kids when there's a lot of brain growth and there's a lot of body growth. So and most of the time it goes away. But it is, it can be pretty frightening. There's actually no risk, like the myth about don't wake them up because, they'll hurt themselves. That's kind of a wives' tale. The risk really about waking them up is it will startle them. Right? And that's kind of not very nice. So just walk them back. My husband tells a story about waking up to his brother when he was a teenager, peeing in the trash can. It's not, don't, shouldn't freak out. One that's a little bit more scary, but is also kind of a normal childhood thing, is a night terror. And a night terror is kind of characterized, I can still remember my daughter's night terrors. It's characterized by sudden wakefulness out of deep sleep, and they wake up and they're screaming or crying out. They're very frightened, and then almost as suddenly they just lay back down and go back to sleep. And have no memory of it. So it's like more terrorizing really to the adults or to the parents than it is to the child, who typically doesn't experience it, who doesn't remember it. A couple others, sleep related eating disorders, and sleep sex disorders. Some books consider these things. Others say that it's not significant enough to call it a thing. But a sleep eating disorder is when someone will eat things in their sleep that they would not normally eat. There's a little video that I assign in this chapter, and there's a woman in there who does this. He talks about how he's had people who would make sandwiches out of like cat food and maybe cigarette butts or something like this. The one time I think there was an eating disorder in my family, well, there were 2 times actually. And I remember my husband told me a story about one of the things he used to make would be peanut butter balls and honey, and he would mix them together and he would make them in a snack. Well, one night, apparently he woke himself up. He had made peanut butter balls, and instead of using honey, instead of using honey, he had used olive oil, and this had woken him up, right? So normally he wouldn't be eating in his sleep, but in this case, he made the wrong thing. I also remember catching my son eating. They used to make this cookie dough around the holidays. It was all just in a big tube, and I remember watching him eat that in the middle of the night when he was asleep. So again, all right. And then sleep sex disorder is a phenomena where people engage in sexual activity that they wouldn't have done when they were awake. There is, I think it's in this chapter as well. There's a story about a gentleman who murders somebody, stabs somebody to death, and then he claims that he has a sleep disorder, a parasomnia, and that is his defense. He says that it was beyond his control. He didn't know he was doing it. And what I ask you to consider is, do you think this is a legitimate defense? Do you think, based on the little bit that is this a legitimate health problem for people to have? I guess that some of that would depend on if you've experienced it yourself, right? Okay, so now, moving on. So that's sleep disorder. Now we move to another thing that occurs during sleep, which is dreams. Just last night, I saw a movie called The Dream Scenario. Obviously, I don't know if you've seen it, and I don't know how for you to tell me if you have, but it's a Nicolas Cage movie where it's about 2 years old. Well, right now it's 2 years old, and he gets reports that he's showing up in people's dreams, and he's just in the background of people's dreams, and he gets really famous. And then all of a sudden he's hurting people in people's dreams, and now everybody hates him, right? And now his wife loses her job, his wife divorces him, and then it leads to the discovery of something called collective consciousness, and some company makes this little device so that you can get into people's dreams, and then it suddenly stops. It's kind of an interesting thing to think about. What are dreams? So dreams, by definition, are unfolding episodes with mental images that occur in real time. So they're basically just pictures in your head. The structures, what exactly do they mean, is another question. Typically, people describe their dreams as having some emotional component. They're typically kind of illogical, and they're very difficult. This is how I think it's interesting some suggest that you should keep a dream log, right? And if you wake up in the morning, can you write down your dream? Chances are, at those very first moments when you wake up, you might be able to describe them. But if you wait 2 hours or even an hour to describe your dream, it probably will be a little bit more difficult. And that is partly because most dreams are illogical. And the pieces don't really fit together. In the next lecture, I'll kind of talk a little bit about how some of the theories as to the meaning, why, or the ways that people give meaning to their dreams. But I'll hold that off for the next video lecture. the parts of the brain. So when we define a nightmare, is basically a dream that we have a negative feeling attached to it. The parts of the brain that are involved in dreams, however, are the visual cortex, right? So that's why we see images. The memory center, which is why a lot of things, the memory center, and the part of the brain that is not active in dreams is the frontal lobe. And you'll remember from the second chapter, the frontal lobe is the part that makes things make sense. The frontal lobe is the critical thinker. The frontal lobe is the part of the brain that says, don't do that. Oh, yes, we should do that. It's that executive function. And cliffhanger, this is the reason that dreams are so weird, is because that part of the brain is not participating. I'm going to stop right there.